Good evening and welcome to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Back at it once again. Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. That's a new cup. Where's the freezer cold cup that you use?
I'm experimenting today. Trying to keep my drinks a secret now. I've got water though. I got my straw.
Eric Eager for Pro Football Focus. Read his great work at PFF.com. What do you got? Tang?
My beautiful and gracious wife Stephanie made me an emergency.
Oh, okay. So
you're making it look like a suicide or a cocktail or something like that. Just for the vibes here.
Strong. And I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City, here to talk some Chiefs football. We've got a lot to get to here tonight as the playoffs are finally upon us. The point in the season where the Kansas City Chiefs will actually be measured, let's be honest. That's what it's all been about this year, is to get to this point. They play in Denver. Not really an impressive win. Are there red flags there in that situation? What's the level of concern right now with the injuries? Travis Kelce, D.Hill, D.Williams all banged up. Thoughts on the defense right now? Mahomes, where's he at? Is he going to have to carry this team? Can he carry this team if need be? Did Mecole Hardman's big day give you encouragement that the number 3 receiver is all set? Is there any reason to think the playoff game against the Steelers won't go any different this time than it did last time? Are the Chiefs still the scariest team in the AFC, or who do we like in that AFC bracket? And how much will not having a first-round bye for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career impact this team? And I think it's a bit of an opportunity for him. I like to say what's at stake for Patrick Mahomes. Let's start at the top. Jeff Chadiha, man of mystery drink. Was the Denver win a red flag for the Chiefs heading into the postseason the way it came down, or no? Is this just a team methodically taking care of business?
I'm not somebody who puts too much into any one game, but I will say that game coupled with the Bengals game is a concern, just because now you're talking about a team that's given up 58 points over the last 2 games. And I would tell you it's really more discouraging that Drew Lock was able to have success against this defense as opposed to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And look, I've seen Denver a few times this year. That is not a good offense. It's not a mediocre offense. It's a bad offense. It's about what Pittsburgh is offensively, minus a legendary quarterback. And so to be in a situation where you might lose a game until Melvin Ingram and Nick Bolton make an amazing play to turn the game around, that does scare me. And it scares me because now all of a sudden the things that were a concern for me with the defense when it was riding high on an 8-game win streak are starting to rear its head. And maybe there is something to be said about business decisions being made on tackling and let down and maybe not caring as much about this game. But end of the day, they had something to play for. They had still had a chance to get the top seed. They had to do their part by winning that game. And that it was that close, yeah, that does give me a little bit of pause. They're going to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I think going beyond that game, it's a little bit scarier for this team.
Eric, how about you? What did you take away from that one?
They looked kind of cranky to be there, right? Like that Mahomes run on the 2-point conversion where he sort of threw the ball at the stands, and it was very clear that he was like ornery. I do agree with Jeff. I think there were some tackling issues, right, that we all remember from the Bengals game, the big plays of Jamar Chase, but we forget the underneath stuff that gained way more yardage than it really should have. Against Denver, their tackling was terrible. I don't think Drew Lock was great throwing the ball, but obviously him running the ball. And then there was that 3rd and 8 when they were up, I believe 28-21, when Drew Lock, they rushed 8 again, and they had one-on-one a big wide receiver against Mike Hughes, and they just threw it up. And so there are characteristics of this team that are still troubling a little bit. I wonder how much of that is just like they're exhausted and they need to get to this part of the game. And I wonder how much they try to play this Steelers game like they played the Denver game, which is, let's play Tyreek Hill the least amount of snaps possible. Let's play Travis Kelce as needed. And how much of that, hurts our perception of them, much like the Denver game did, in my opinion.
Yeah. Listen, Andy Reid made a statement this week where he basically said, to me, I thought he finally said, in code, we had a bit of a letdown. He said, look, we're in kind of a unique situation. We win the AFC West, and then you still have 2 games to play. Is there any other way to take that, Jeff, than a guy saying, we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, and now it's tough to get up for the games, right? That has to be what he's saying. He never wants to admit that. We say, hey, could you have a letdown here? I asked him if there would be a letdown when they got the number 1 seed. And they didn't. They won that first game that they were back in the number 1 seed against the Chargers. But then, and they handled the Steelers. Or maybe the Steelers was the first game. They dominated the Steelers when they had the number 1 seed. But then they clearly had a problem against the Bengals. Is it as simple as that? Letdowns are real. Coaches don't like to admit it, but Andy Reid actually just did admit that they had a letdown.
Well, they are real. And I think coaches don't like admitting that because it means you didn't coach that well. I mean, you got to get your players up to play in these games. And it may be a bit of an easy excuse to go to, as opposed to just saying, look, we had some issues we got to clean up here. Hey, mentally, we just weren't into the game. We just weren't ready to play. That does happen in the NFL. My issue with it is, as I mentioned before, just that there was something to play for. But 2, it's not that much of a reach to see Josh Allen doing what Drew Lock was doing. That's really the scary part, is that even when Drew Lock wasn't throwing the football well, he was making plays with his legs. And that's Josh Allen's entire game. And so I don't know how you remedy that except to get guys more focused, more dialed in. And maybe, to be honest with you, maybe this is something that Steve Spagnuolo's got to look at, which if he had a bye week to look at to use, it could have been helpful, which is to say, am I being too aggressive? Am I trying to do too many things? Am I trying to be too complex with what I'm doing? Because you are seeing some breakdowns here. You are seeing some players put in positions that were happening earlier in the season that were yielding a lot of big plays and a lot of ugly football. So I think that letdown is fine, but I think strategic and also just the deployment of personnel is something they have to be questioning right now.
I think Vegas, the odds makers, Eric, are definitely looking at this as, a game that they mailed in because they're not laying 12.5. This is the largest point spread. I think you were the one who pointed this out to me. This is the largest point spread, or maybe I don't know. Anyway, I heard it somewhere. This is the largest point spread for the wild card round by 2 points. Now, we've never had a 2 seed play in the wild card round, so that's of note. This is theoretically the best team that's ever played in the wild card round, so the number ought to be pretty big. But there's clearly no hesitation out of the odds makers that the Chiefs are still definitively the better team. They're not fearing that this team is somehow coming into this game with the tank on empty.
This would have been the matchup in 2019 had we had the same playoff format, right? The Steelers would have been the 7, Chiefs would have been the 2. And this is the biggest point spread of the weekend. It's the biggest point spread I can remember in this round. You think about that, the Chiefs were favored by less, and I know they were on the road, and Denver's actually got a home field advantage because of altitude and things like that. But then, the Chiefs were only 10.5 point favorites against the Broncos just last week, and now they're 12.5 against Pittsburgh, a team that, has some good components to it. This is a game. I mean, the Chiefs drew the best possible situation, right? The best possible situation for them. Everybody wanted the tie on Sunday Night Football. Everybody wanted this, that, and the other thing. And, if they would have faced the Chargers or the Raiders, it would have been, especially the Chargers. But if they would have faced the Chargers or the Raiders, obviously this is a much bigger grind. And I think, the biggest thing the Chiefs have to sort of avoid here is another letdown. But make no mistake, this Steelers team sucks. And I think that, they're in the playoffs because their coach is wonderful. But I think it ends here.
Make no mistake about it. This Steeler team sucks. I believe we heard that going into week 17 when the Chiefs did absolutely dominate the Steelers. So we're not shocked that that's what we're hearing this time. Letdown, okay, that's the biggest thing Eric says they have to be concerned with. But Jeff is really the biggest thing health. Tyreek Hill limped through a game, had one big first down catch. A lot of people seem to think, well, he could have played more, but he didn't. Travis Kelce limped off the field at one point. A lot of people are very nervous about that one. I'm a little bit nervous the way Andy Reid it's fine. It's fine. That to me is Andy Reid covering something up. To me is, I don't even want to discuss this because I don't want the defensive guys targeting a certain part of Travis Kelce. That one concerns me. And then D.Williams, although they should have Clyde Edwards-Helaire back. We've seen Jerick McKinnon look good. Gore, frankly, has been the best pure runner of the bunch. if you're honest with it. So maybe that's a position that they're the deepest at, but his injury is the bigger concern in this one.
I would think so, for two reasons. One, even though the Steelers are a bad football team, you're still playing a football game. And so there are things that can happen in these games that you don't want to see happen. You go back to the Bengals game. They lost Lucas Niang. You start this past game with Tyreek Hill with a heel injury. And I agree with you. I think that the way Travis Kelce left the field, it wasn't encouraging by any means. And so we do know that Andy Reid, going back to the Eric Berry days, can tell you a lot of things about injuries that end up not, I don't want to say being false, but he can stretch the truth a little bit. He can make things sound better or more encouraging than they actually are. So I'm certainly concerned about that. I'm concerned about D.Williams. I'm concerned about Tyreek Hill because they're not going to get the rest they would have gotten with a bye week. And this offense, even though you have a phenomenal quarterback, a generational talent at quarterback, you still need to have players around him to have success. Now, do I think they can beat Pittsburgh without those guys? Yeah, I do think that. But I also suspect Pittsburgh's not going to come in here and lay down. That's the one thing I will say about them with that point spread that I do think is going to affect this game is that they're going to look at that. They're going to watch that film again, and they're going to read all the things that were said about them by people like me 3 weeks ago about how they were dead, they were done, don't let this team into the playoffs because they shouldn't be here. All that stuff's going to be motivation for them. So I don't expect them to come in here and get beaten by 26 points. I think it'll be a much closer game, and they'll be a much saltier bunch. And so that kind of dynamic can lead to banged up players getting more banged up, which should be the biggest concern for the Chiefs going into this game.
What about the playoffs now being a comfy leather jacket, Eric? I mean, to Gary's point, and Gary's, if you're listening to us on the podcast when we stream live Tuesday nights at 9, you can be part of the chat room. Gary hitting us up through Facebook. The letdown logic makes sense, but they should be used to it. Just got beat by the Bengals and laid an egg. I don't know if they laid an egg against Denver. I think Denver's a team that makes you look bad, right? I think just you get a win. You never apologize for a win in the NFL. But I think there is something to be said for they ought to be used to it. And I do think there's definitely something to be said for, I mean, this team could have limped into the playoffs at 9-8. They could have gone in at 15-1 or 16-1. 17-0, we'd be talking about something else. We'd be talking about going undefeated. I guess at 16-1, they'd be the first 16-1 team and would have a chance at the most wins and all those different things. But realistically, this team was going to make its bones. How it's going to be remembered is not going to be based upon some come from behind win against the Chargers or the fact that they fumbled against the Chargers or fumbled against the Ravens or, whatever. This season will be made by what happens here moving forward. Is that what ignites the juices? And do you buy that there's a comfort level and teams that have been there play better? Experience matters.
Yeah, I think that's always now going to be the thing with this football team, right? And I, I can tell you right now, like there are people I talk to within the organization where it's a different feel now, right? It's a different feel. Like the wins aren't as sweet anymore, right? Like that win against the Chargers was really fun, right? The blowing out the Steelers is just a relief in the regular season, right? Like that's the word that specific word I heard, right? It's a different feel with this football team. It's get to January healthy, and get to January in a position where your regular season doesn't screw you nearly as much as it could, right? And why was the Patriots dynasty so, sort of steadfast? It's because they got the 2 seed or better every freaking year, right? They got the first round bye from 2010 to 2018. So every single year they're in that cluster of teams, right? And, obviously the early part of the season really hurt the Chiefs. The loss to the Bengals killed their chances at a bye. But I do think there's some rejuvenation at this idea of like, look, we didn't get everything we wanted in the regular season accomplished. I think we'll all agree, this is the worst year. This is the worst year of the sort of Patrick Mahomes era in the regular season, but they didn't completely tank their opportunity to sort of have a relatively decent path to the Super Bowl. And I think that's, a big deal.
By the way, I am proud that Aaron was able to make you chuckle with the Steelers and Lombardi suck in quotes, and then attributed to one Eric Eager. I don't know if you heard that earlier today, Jeff. Eager said on my radio show, Lombardi sucks as an offensive. He
must be talking about Joe and not Vince, right?
Yeah, Joe
See,
Lombardi.
look, the fact that Jeff knows exactly which Lombardi I'm talking about makes you know that that I know that is the truth, right?
Yeah.
Vince?
Same family,
no, I'm not talking about
different generation.
Yeah, I don't know. His 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 inside his 20 back-to-back call. Were I don't know. They're pretty gem. Somewhere Anthony Sherman stood up and applauded. Thought it was a great call. Just didn't get blocked well enough when it was all said and done. I know. Look, I think the question is, and I'll group it together. The injuries, like I think they're good enough. Will we all agree if they sat? Because people are joking around. I'm trying to figure out. Oli Satchdad said, start the backups, bring in the ones if they get down. Just kidding. But I actually had people asking that question seriously today. Like, could you just not play the ones and, or at least the guys that are hurt get away with it and then end up, being fine when it's all said and done. And that you could just rally the troops if you need to, that the Steelers are so bad. That's not going to happen, right? No coach not going to play his frontline guys, because if it starts to go south and he can't, pull the yoke up and get out of the nosedive and save the day, he's going to be skewered. So that wouldn't happen. But if they do have to play without Hill and Kelce, or at least without a lot of them, or without them at full strength, is everybody still very confident that they're still good enough with Pringles, Hardmans, Grays, and Robinsons to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, you can only go off what you saw the last time they played, and not having Travis Kelce didn't hurt them. Tyreek Hill didn't have a huge day. That didn't hurt them. I was of the belief that the Pittsburgh Steelers could win that game if those guys didn't play. I still think that there is, anytime you play an NFL game, anybody can win. And so as good as the Chiefs are, as bad as the Steelers are, there's always that possibility. See the Indianapolis Colts versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 days ago. The only path Pittsburgh has to win this game is the same path they had 3 weeks ago when they played, which is to ugly it up. For it to be to be a game similar to what Denver was, to be honest with you, where they are getting some turnovers. They're getting some inconsistency from the Chiefs offense. They're getting some big plays from T.J. Watt. I mean, every player on their team who's worth a damn has got to show up and play at a high level. They cannot win this game if Patrick Mahomes has 7 seconds to the football. They can't win this game if Byron Pringle and Mecole Hardman are having big days and Gore, people like that. They're going to have to find a lot of breaks and make it really ugly. And that's really hard to do at this time of year. End of the day, Pittsburgh is here because they beat a beat-up Baltimore team with a backup quarterback playing. They beat a beat-up Cleveland Browns team with a quarterback who's, don't even know he's going to be there in a couple of years. And they beat a Tennessee team that didn't have Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, committed 4 turnovers when they had a 10-point lead. Take away those games, and Pittsburgh's sitting here watching the Chargers play football on this weekend. And so it's really hard to make that leap to think they can actually pull off the upset. But I think it'll be closer just because they have pride. They've got a great coach, and they've got, like everybody else, a chance to be rejuvenated this time of year.
Yeah, and I think this is one that if the Chiefs do get up, Andy Reid is going to keep things close to the vest, wants everything he can to take to the next game. I don't think he's just going to, shower them with all kinds of fancy plays. Maybe not. Maybe he's got enough for everyone. Bonkowski asking, how worried are you about T.J. Watt versus Wiley in the rematch? Wiley did a nice job. T.J. Watt should be healthier. 2 more weeks. 2 weeks?
3
more weeks removed from the broken ribs. Is this a concern? If we talk about the other injuries, is really the focus back on the offensive line? Eric?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Wiley was, Wiley's played a lot this year. I also think, with the depth that they got with, Kyle Long and Nick Allegretti and, the ability for, in the worst case scenario, the ability for Joe Thuney to play left tackle and Orlando Brown to play right tackle. They have so many more outs this year if stuff breaks poorly for them on the offensive line than they did last year, right? Like last year in the Super Bowl, I mean, you're talking about you put Mike Remmers at left tackle, right? And that's just, not necessarily what you want. Remmers, I believe, is eventually going to be healthy. Like, who knows with him? But, like, I'm way less concerned about the offensive line because I think that they can make changes, right? They don't have to burn the boats with who they have now the way that they did last year. So they have more of an opportunity. But what is I said this on your show today. Like, there's a couple players in this game that can ruin it for the Chiefs. TJ Watt's one of them with all the sacks. He's a monster. And then on the offensive side of the ball, Deontay Johnson's a player that when he decides to hang on to the football, he's a really solid player. I don't think that much of Najee Harris, but like he is a guy that, can control the game for them. And, if the Chiefs don't tackle, he can be a menace, much in the same way that Melvin Gordon was a menace last week. So there are outs for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win this game.
No doubt. Defensively, though, how concerned should Chiefs fans be with the tackling, with the fact that Drew Lock, I mean, he didn't even throw for 200 yards. Let's not get carried away. But when he needed to drop in some passes, he was able to get them dropped in, move the chains. They ran the ball very effectively. Again, almost 200 yards. Bonkowski abolished the Ben Neiman and Dirty Dan. Money down, you take out Gay and Bolton, and that does happen. And it's stunning to me, unless the plan is everybody plays. I've hatched this one. Tell me if you think this can fly, Jeff. Everybody plays. We always hear Spagnuolo say we're going to need everybody during the course of the year. Is he playing everybody all along, saying, hey, it's a long run. I'm going to limit everybody's snaps. I'm going to try to get everybody to the finish line healthy. And then now we're going to watch Nick Bolton and Willie Gay take over the linebacker position. Is that what we're going to see? Or is the concern that Steve Spagnuolo seems to be sliding back towards guys that were really a big, big problem for this team when it was really struggling on defense?
Well, again, I've always felt like there's a reason why he trusts Neiman and Sorensen in these situations and why Bolton and Gay aren't getting as much run for whatever reason. I mean, it'd be nice if he would say what it is so we can all understand it. I agree. It's easier to play the more athletic players than the guys who are younger with more potential and higher ceilings. But there's a reason why he's putting them out there. And so I understand that. I think that those guys were playing, Bolton and Gay were playing in that Cincinnati game. I saw them running. I saw Jamar Chase running by them at different points of that kind. I saw them missing tackles. And so, it's very easy to dump this all on the Ben Niemans and the Dan Sorensens of the world. Again, there are things that I see happening. I've seen Tyrann Mathieu not make plays. I've seen Charvarius Ward not make plays. I've seen Frank Clark not make plays. And that matters just as much to what's happening with this defense as what those guys are doing. It's not as simple as two guys get out there and then all of a sudden big plays start happening. Do I think that they are an issue? Yeah. But do I think there are bigger issues than them? I certainly feel that way.
Don't you think, Jeff, like the fact that these guys, there's athleticism to what Willie Gay is doing and Nick Bolton are doing. Don't you think, though, that having those guys on the field mitigate some of the mistakes of the other? Because, like, my issue is if Frank Clark or, let's say Tyrann Mathieu makes a mistake and it's Daniel Sorensen back there, like there's absolutely no ability to cover up what's going to be a problem there.
Yeah.
And to me, I think that's where I would get a little bit worried. It is, and I agree. Like, I think that the word out is that, guys like Anthony Hitchens get the players lined up right. The guys like Ben Neiman get the players lined up right. And I got it's a concern to me. And like, as somebody who was a teacher, a professor, 10 years or so of teaching math, it's like at some point you're a bad teacher if there's only so many people who understand what you're trying to do.
Oh.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I think like, Willie Gay's been on this team for 2 years. If he can't get people lined up, then I think there's something wrong with the way Spagnuolo basically gave up on him being a green dot guy or whatever. That's what I'm worried about. And I think that they view Nick Bolton as the eventual green dot guy, but it really limits them when they only consider a certain cluster of players as guys that can sort of call the defense.
Well, and it limits your personnel combinations, right? If you've got to leave a true Mike linebacker on the field just because he's the only one that can line everybody up because you can't trust Willie Gay to get everybody lined up, or you can't have a safety do it, and carry that designation, that starts to limit you because now you're saying, okay, either Nick Bolton's going to be the one linebacker on the field if you're going to go to a dime package and keep 4 down linemen, or you got to take a down lineman off. And to me, that's where you start to get, I think that's where, maybe teams have gotten back to, they've recognized where it is that Steve Spagnuolo will insert Dan Sorensen or Ben Neiman, but mostly Dan Sorensen's where we've seen him beaten over the top. They go, if we do this, he will do that, and then we get that matchup. And I think if you say personnel-wise, well, if they do that, if they go 4 wide, or if it's 4 wide but with a tight end, and he knows that Spagnuolo's history is, well, he can't take that green dot off the field, so Nick Bolton's going to be out there, so he's going to take Willie Gay off the field. Now we've got a matchup. I mean, that was Bob Sutton's – that's what ultimately ended his tenure in Kansas City was we watched horrible game after horrible game, and it'd be like, hey, why was this guy covering this guy? Well, their personnel package really dictated that. No, it didn't. It's not a cause and effect, right? It's not a teeter-totter because they went down, you went up. That's not how it works. You can put different personnel out there, but I almost feel like maybe Spagnuolo's backsliding, into a little bit of that, and teams are recognizing, okay, if we do this, he does that. And I remember when it was a big deal, Jeff, you're old, and Eric, you probably are too, but the Buffalo Bills, the big thing when the Jim Kelly Buffalo Bills was like, they could flex Thurman Thomas out wide, right? They could go 3 wide because they could put him out there. That was even a nuance with Marshall Faulk. And that was like this thing, oh my God, they can be in 3 wide personnel while showing you their run personnel. Well, crap, everybody can do that now, right? Everybody can take the tight end and walk him out 4 steps and take your linebacker out there or force Nick Bolton to get certain people. I mean, that's the problem if those guys, and I think that's why Willie Gay was there at the end of round 2, because his athleticism says bottom of round 1, right? But if it's like we can't even consider having to make decisions, then I think we know why he was there at the bottom of round 2.
Yeah, well, and look, I think there's a couple ways to look at this. One is to say it's not so much about Bolton and Gaggs. I think if you're seeing a lot of, sub packages anyway from the defense, there's only so many guys you can have out there playing linebacker. So you need to have somebody out there who knows what they're doing. If they don't trust Gay to do it, then that is going to be an issue at some point. But the bigger issue here, and this is what Cincinnati was able to do, is just formation-wise, if you have enough talent, you can create those matchups that are favorable to the offense against the Chiefs defense. And so much of what they've relied upon is just 2 things. One is Chris Jones being a one-man wrecking crew up front, and the other part of it is Tyrann Mathieu being a true difference maker on the back end. I think one of the most underrated parts of this defense's issues in the last couple of weeks is Tyrann Mathieu hadn't been making a lot of plays. And so they want him to be in that robber position or the rat, whatever you want to call it these days, in the middle of the field, 2 safeties back. They got 3 safeties in. He's playing in the middle of the field, trying to pick off crossing patterns or blitz or be a confusing chess piece. And you're right, Soren. I think teams are saying, all right, we'll keep you there, and we'll just attack Daniel Sorensen or whoever else we want. We'll attack Charvarius Ward. We'll take advantage of those matchups that are coming out of this. And so some of this, again, is just it's strategic. It's how they want to play, but it's also one of your best players isn't playing at a high level anymore, or the way they're playing him is making him less effective.
Confidence that they'll play at a high level on defense, Eric. I mean, I kind of see some cracks. I mean, I think they're real. I think the defense kind of peaked, and I don't think they have the next answer. Could be wrong. Spagnuolo's a smart guy and had a lot of confidence, but I think there's more pressure on the offense as we move forward because I don't think that stretch we saw, the defense was a little bit of fool's gold. Not to say Jeff's right. Right?
You can say it.
Calm down.
It's okay.
Calm down. Calm the F down. All right.
I think were there cracks in the 2019 defense?
Yeah, but there were. I know, but let's still. I just want to say this. I do think we have to acknowledge you and I always being a little bit more of the banner wavers. Okay, I think the defense was a little bit of fool's gold, and all the times like, well, they didn't get to go against Rodgers, they didn't get to go against that guy. They've the 14, Jeff put it in our face, the 14 touchdowns and 2 INTs. When you throw in Herbert didn't end up making it. We thought Herbert was going to make it, but when he was in that mix, it was looking like he was going to be in the playoffs. The big time quarterbacks have really gotten him at the beginning and at the end. They didn't play him in the middle, and that's why it looked really good. And there are big boys waiting for him in this playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and they caught a huge break Sunday night. Like with we talked about the Chargers on air today on your show on A10, but like they're also catching a big break this year with Buffalo and Tennessee. Like Buffalo and Tennessee last year were much better teams than they are this year. You look at Josh Allen that six completion percentage points worse than last year. 1 yard per pass attempt worse, 15 passer rating points worse, 10 PFF grade points worse, right? Like even the Buffalo team that they're going to face scares the hell out of me, but it's not as nearly as good as it was last year, right? Like to some extent, yes, I agree. If you catch Josh Allen, you catch Justin Herbert, you catch Joe Burrow, and we did, right? We saw what happened there. You catch Ryan Tannehill, he was nails in the game that they faced him in week 7. You catch any of these guys on a great day, that defense is going to have a hard time, right? And that defense is going to have to depend upon that offense to make plays. And that is unmistakable. And that's also true. That was also true when they won the Super Bowl in 2019. And I don't necessarily know if it was true last year. But I think the defense is good enough to get them on the green. And I do think that in recent weeks should hurt. Like I'd rather the last 2 weeks happen the last 2 weeks than happen now. Like is kind of my glass half full, red and gold colored glasses, because I do think it's correctable. It was correctable when they were 3-7 and started a defensive renaissance. It's correctable now. Will they do it? That remains to be seen. And I don't think it's a lock. I don't think it's a lock that this defense is going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl with.
How about this? Oli Satchstad. Can we tier the hardest matchups for KC? I'm assuming Cincy, Buffalo at the top, followed by Tennessee, New England. Is there a big gap between those as we talk about because, Eric just said Buffalo's not as good as they were last year. And the numbers say Jeff Allen's not playing as well. Josh Allen. Be a miracle if Jeff Allen lined up, the old guard for the Chiefs, under center for the Bills. Josh Allen isn't playing as well. And I get that. But I still think the Bills are the most dangerous team out there. They scare the hell out of me because they can defend, and I like that they're now handing the ball off. You throw to win, run when you're winning, but having a balance and running. Eric? You even had a way of putting it. Running with a purpose, or what was it?
Well, I actually think this is somewhat BS, but like the idea is that you have to be able to run when you want to.
Well, I think you need to be able to run when Josh Allen's not having a day.
Yeah.
So you believe it or you don't believe in it?
Well,
I think that's the same.
I think
I don't believe in it. That's what they say.
I think you have to have a credible threat of the run.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with that. You have to have a credible threat of the run. I think that teams around the NFL go out of their way to be like, hey, I need to establish the run. And to me, I think that that's how a lot of teams lose, because they get to quarter 2 and they're like, oh man, we still haven't established the run. And Mike Zimmer, they're down 20-0 to Green Bay. And they're like, well, what do you need to do in the second half? We need to run the football better. And it's like, well, no, you're an idiot because you're down 20-3. And, but you do need to be able to have a credible threat to do multiple things at once. That to me is what I think you need to have on offense.
Yeah. How about it, Jeff? Are the Bills the toughest as we look at it, where the path, if you want somebody taken out, if you're a Chiefs fan, you say, hey, who can do the heavy lifting for us? Like, 2019, the Titans did the lifting on the Ravens, right? They were the hot team that year. The Titans got them out of there. For me, it's the Bills. Who is it for you?
Yeah, it's the Bills. And I'd push back on what Eric said. I think that they're better because they're better defensively. Josh Allen may not be playing at the same level, but their defense is head and shoulders above where it was last year when they got to the AFC title game, because they went out and they really, First of all, they got a better pass rush. They've drafted better. They've gotten some players back from COVID from last year. Even losing Tre'Davious White, which is a big loss, a Pro Bowl, an All-Pro corner. They have two really good safeties. This team was built to play against the Chiefs defensively. So I think that's what makes them scarier is they recognize that they just can't come up here and Josh Allen it up and have their quarterback go against the Chiefs quarterback and see who comes out on top. Like they recognize that, we had this argument a few weeks ago with Eric about the Bills running the football, and he, said that they're not a good running team. Well, you still got to do it because you have to do it because you have to create matchups. And if you're not willing to take certain players out of the equation, say like a Tyrann Mathieu, if you don't get him concerned about having to tackle somebody, he's going to kill you. If he all he has to do is just run around, figure out what you're trying to do, how you're trying to attack him through the air, it's going to be a problem. And so I do think that does make them more dangerous. And it also takes more pressure off Josh Allen, that they're more willing to hand the ball off to guys like Devin Singletary. But I think Tennessee is number two. I think Tennessee's number two because, one, they have home field advantage, but two, they have a way of playing football that is what the Steelers used to be, which is they're going to stick with what they do. They're going to be very physical. They're not going to beat themselves up or beat themselves with silly mistakes, and they're going to be consistent. And so I think you look at the way they played the Chiefs, aside from the AFC title game, that's given the Chiefs problems over the last 3 years. And so Cincinnati, I think, is three just because the margin of victory in that game was closer. They've got some explosive elements. But those other two teams, they beat the Chiefs, blew them out pretty easily. And so that's what scares me.
Just for argument's sake about the Bills and about the importance of running the ball, and I think I fall somewhere between you two, probably closer to Eric than Jeff, but I think there's a pretty good separation. Look, last four games, the Buffalo Bills have won their last four games, 31-14 over Carolina. Granted, not a good team. 22 carries, 86 yards for Singletary, or for Singleton. Singletary, excuse me. Next game, they beat the New England Patriots, 33-21. He's 12 carries, 39 yards. Beat the Falcons, 29-15, 23 carries, 110 yards. Beat the Jets, 27-10, 19 carries for 88 yards. Bad teams except for the Patriots. The Patriots.
Are you getting to the fact that the Bills had the easiest schedule in football this year, other than maybe?
I do think, their point differential is real. They had the easiest schedule, and they beat some people down. And their losses, the Jacksonville loss makes you think, well, these guys didn't beat anybody, right? They actually did. They handled business, and their losses other than Jacksonville are pretty respectable. But I just do think that they were putting too much on Josh Allen. And I think the Chiefs have put too much on Patrick Mahomes at times. And it's not to say that there aren't moments that either one of those guys, and I would lean towards Mahomes being able to do it more often, can't take that and carry it. But there are also times that they can't, and when they can't, you got to have something else. And I think the Bills have something else now. That's my only point. And I think the Titans are going to have something else. I think Deontay Foreman, somebody finally ran him the way they should run him. Like he doesn't suck. Like he's bounced around from team to team, and I think nobody just really knew what to do with him or commit to him. He's diet Derrick Henry. That's how they run him. And I gave you guys the stats. I have to look at one of my phones here. Hang on, because I sent you guys where the Titans were. Like if we're going to talk about what the Titans threat is, because I want to give credit to whoever it was that had, I think it was ESPN had the stat, or maybe it was Eric's or Jeff's NFL Network, where they gave what the, they're carrying the ball just as much now, the Titans are, and their run production is down only like 10 yards, or it's like
10 yards per game.
Yeah, 10 yards per game. So like they early on kind of struggled to figure out who they were, when Derrick Henry went down, but they've gotten back to where they are, and they do pound the rock, and they're going to force you to tackle. And while I don't think it's the most efficient way to score, I think it's the best thing to do when you don't have an elite quarterback. And I think it also can make you difficult because you're the changeup and you punish people.
Let me ask you this, and I think this is what kills me when we talk about the quarterback without the running game. What great quarterback out there in the last 30 years has won a championship without some kind of decent running back?
Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And even Brady, you say, he was throwing the ball to guys. It was a short passing game,
Patriots,
but he also had what, the LeGarrette Blount one year?
No, the 2014 Patriots leading rusher was Jonas Gray with 412 yards. I think the Pats in 16, they had Blount, but Blount was a 3.9 yards per carry guy.
But how many yards?
He did have
He ran for like 1,100 yards, didn't he?
Yeah, but that's at 3.9 a carry. That's not.
That means they gave it to him more.
Right?
I mean, I think listen, Jonas Gray, God, I can barely remember the guy. That's a team that's done it, right? You can do it with Tom Brady. And if the Chiefs or the Bills or anybody else in this playoffs doesn't run the ball, then that's the recipe. I mean, I think we now have an outlier of somebody that's out there. I think everybody would love to have a good running game to turn to. If nothing else, just to make it easier to finish games that you've piled up a big lead with your passing attack, if nothing else. But if you don't have that quarterback, then you have to have it, right? I mean, the Patriots' early championship, one of the early ones with Tom Brady, they needed Corey Dillon because Tom Brady was a 24-12 quarterback. He wasn't what Tom Brady has become today. He was more of just an average guy. So they needed it, and I think teams play, the Giants needed O.J. Anderson in 1990 to get the job done against the Bills. Like they weren't going to shoot it out with Phil McConkey and Mark Ingram and whoever the hell else was on that team.
The leading wide receiver on that team had like 36 catches.
But you also don't have to hand the ball to him. You throw the ball in the flat and the guy can run for 5 yards. It's the same effect.
Well, and not only that, it's also you can run the RPO stuff. Like I didn't even realize this, until I actually looked. Josh Allen had a career high in rushing yards this year. Josh Allen this season had 763 rushing yards, 6.3 yards per attempt, carried the ball 122 times. It's a career high. I know they had the 17th game or whatever, but like if you would have asked somebody who's the leading rusher among quarterbacks this year, you would have obviously people won't say Lamar because he was hurt for a lot of time. People would say like Kyler Murray. People would say that was Josh Allen running the ball. Like and quarterback runs are extremely efficient in the NFL. And you're right. Like the thing about football is you need to be multiple. You need to have credible threats to do multiple things. And I think with Kansas City, for example, like to bring this back to the Chiefs, like the reason that Clyde has not worked for them is Clyde is the Sony Michel of this team. When Sony Michel played for the Pats in 18, it was if Sony's in the backfield, they're running the ball to Sony. If James White's in the backfield, they're throwing the ball to James White. And that's why the Patriots kind of struggled after they brought Michel in, offensively at least, and why sometimes this offense works better when there is a D.Williams in the game, because not because Daryl's a better runner, but because Daryl can do more things and they're less predictable with him in the backfield. And I think that the Bills are becoming that with Devin Singletary, to your point, Jeff, is like I think Devin Singletary is a guy that you catch the ball out of the backfield better than Zach Moss. He doesn't fumble like Matt Breida. He's there, but he might not be as good of a runner as Matt Breida, for example. And he might not be as good of a runner as Zach Moss, but he can do the whole thing better than both of those guys kind of combined.
By the way, the Bills could have gotten to Devin Singletary a lot earlier this year and helped me out in a couple of fantasy leagues because I've always thought the guy was pretty good, but they didn't get it to him. Let's talk a little bit about Patrick Mahomes and what he's going to have to do in this playoffs. I actually heard, I think it might have been Scott Van Pelt on ESPN say, not like a challenge or not like the guy can't do it. Sometimes when you go, I want to see if the guy can, people are like, oh, you're saying he can't do it? No. I'm just saying I'd like to see it, or I'm asking the question, can he do it? He said the one thing we haven't seen from Patrick Mahomes and maybe what he needs to do to go to the next level is go do it on the road, right? Like every playoff game has been at home, to his credit, and putting his team in that position. He got a little fortune in 19 to get the home game because of, like we said, Titans knocking off the Ravens and the Patriots choking against the Dolphins in the last game of the season to bump them from 3-2 and then not having to face the number one. They got the AFC Championship game at home. But that being said, what is at stake for Patrick Mahomes here, Jeff? Like what does, this playoff mean for him when he's been on such a heater to start his career?
Well, I don't put a lot of stock into he has to go on the road to prove something about himself or his ability. I can't remember Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. I can't remember their road wins and what that meant to their legacies.
I think. Well, wait a minute. I think he put an exclamation point by beating Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead Stadium with a team that wasn't his best team in 18, right? Like I think that was big. I think he was
already pretty set legacy wise.
Jeff's point is like a good one in that, like what I said on your show today, which was like Joe Montana had one career road playoff win.
Yeah.
Before he got to Kansas City. Now it was a different field back then. But I do come back to Petro's point. Like Aaron Rodgers' only Super Bowl was he ran the 6th seed. Yeah. Big Ben's first Super Bowl, he ran the 6th seed to it. Yeah. Joe Flacco, like, and granted, Joe Flacco sucks, but like, he doesn't suck, but he's not in that group.
Yeah.
But Joe Flacco
suck in this league, according to you, Eric. I mean,
Joe Flacco,
a lot of sucking going on.
Joe Flacco went to Denver. Joe Flacco went to New England. Like that's a legacy builder, right?
Yeah.
Patrick hasn't even played a road playoff game yet.
Yeah.
Like,
is that his fault though?
No, it's not. And again, that's what I said. This is not to knock him.
Yeah.
It's just to say we haven't seen it. Mark Sanchez, by the way, butt fumble.
Four road playoff games his first 2 years in the league.
Went on the road and won. We just haven't seen it. And I think we've got an opportunity, like just talking about the kid's legacy. And if things hold to seed, he'll have to go to Tennessee to get to the Super Bowl. And I think that'll be something new. And listen, I don't think he's going to wet down his leg. And I don't think, the sun's going to boil or, like the sky's going to turn to blood or something. Like that's not going to happen, right? It'll just be interesting to see how I think he'll be aces. I mean, I think the guy's a stud. So
I think the bigger question for Mahomes is, can he keep playing the way he's had to play over the last 8 games or 9 games, whatever it's been, and stay true to that. He's only had one 300-yard game in the last 8 games, the last 7 weeks. And he's done a great job of being patient and taking what people are giving him. What is going to happen when there is more pressure? What is going to happen when there may be an offense that can go up and down the field against his defense and create some issues for them when he has to play with a deficit? Can he stay true to that? Because I think that, let's not forget, start of this year, when the big problems that he had was trying to do too many things and trying to press it and having a lot of turnovers happen because he wanted to make those kind of plays. I think it's a lot easier to play within yourself and to be patient when the games don't mean as much. And when you're in the postseason and it's 1 and out and you've been used to having your way at this time of year, that is going to be a challenge for him because all these teams now have 17 weeks of game tape on him and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And so he's going to see more of that. And so, he's going to have to be comfortable knowing that, okay, I just can't go ahead and dial up 70 yards of Tyreek Hill, or I can't dial up 12 receptions of Tyreek because teams are going to give you that. And so there is going to be that element that I think he's got to prove he can still keep doing that.
Did we get enough out of Mecole Hardman, Eric, to think that they now have a credible? I mean, you did the breakdown a year or so ago and talked about how important in postseasons the third option comes, that a lot of playoff games are decided by whose third option has the better day because you're running into defenses that clearly have good 1 and 2 corners that, okay, now it's the team that can go even deeper on those receivers to get it done. Is Mecole Hardman, with his performance, giving you encouragement that they might actually have a real threat there?
It's a tough question, right? Because
you're laughing already.
Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like your answer is no.
If you come up for air and look and say, "Oh, Mecole Hardman had 700 yards receiving this year," would all of you guys, like, the yards are always funny to me. 17 game obviously throws us off a little bit, but like Mecole Hardman wasn't getting snaps like a month ago, right? Like was not getting offensive run. He was getting like 9 snaps a game, and I felt like in the last month of the season, for example, by the way, McKinnon was one, like that was a really good play on the touchdown by McKinnon against Denver.
Temecula Hound Dog talking about that. He said
on the stream here. Thank you for all the people that are with us live today. The Hardman to me has the role now that he had as a rookie where he was very effective, which was if a team sleeps on him like Cincinnati did, then he gets over the top on a corner route. Patrick can hit him, and he can hang on to the ball, and that's a big play. The bubble screens against Denver. I mean, there was the one that he broke on the final drive to basically set up the icing of the game, but he had one where he was just like an ankle tackle away from having an 80-yard touchdown too, and you could see the explosiveness there. You can see the the playmaking ability there, and I think he's one of those guys, and unfortunately, like, he's always going to be viewed as a disappointment, and I think that's fine. But as long as we don't get seduced by expectations, I think he's a contributor to this team that's valuable, right? And as long as your bar for him isn't you need to line up and play 70 snaps a game and be an every down wide receiver, like I can find positivity about his contribution.
Are you good with Mecole Hardman? Do you think he plays a big role in this playoff, Jeff?
I think he plays a big role if T.Hill is limited. I think that's where he begins to shine, and I do think we are especially hard on him because of where he was drafted and what we thought he could become. But I do feel like he's only really impressive to me when he's playing in T.Hill's position and they feature him in different. They do things that work for him, that work well for him. They run plays that exploit what he does well. When you're asking him to be your third option, I think it is a little bit hit and miss with him. And that's where it gets tricky, because the game against the Bengals, yeah, he did some good things, but then there are other games where he disappears. And the Bengals are a great example of what the Chiefs offense should be in terms of 3 great receivers, a talented running back, a talented tight end. Like, they get everybody the football. Why that can't happen with Mecole Hardman or Byron Pringle, I don't know. Maybe it has more to do with Patrick Mahomes having more trust in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. But I just don't know if I trust Mecole Hardman enough in that spot. I think he still has to prove a lot to me, especially in the postseason, that he can be a difference maker in that way. Because ultimately, he's not going to get 10 targets in a playoff game. He's going to get 3 or 4, and he's going to have to make those count.
Let me ask you this. I want to run this one by you. Aaron asks, are Mahomes' family antics becoming an issue, or is it just what hits my feed? There's another one, apparently, people in Denver haranguing his brother before the game. They're always, his brother and his fiance are always down on the field beforehand. I'll say it. I mean, are they affecting him? I think not right now. He's playing 12 touchdowns, 1 INT in his last 4 or 5 games. He seems to be playing his best football. So, Aaron, I don't think it's affecting him on the field yet, but this cannot be a positive. Like, at what point there are 53 active guys. We would see about a group of 100 people if every player were allowed to bring a couple of people down on the field. At some point, Jeff, this has to be an issue with teammates. I would think, forget about if it's an issue with Patrick Mahomes. Doesn't this get to be the kind of thing that guys get pissed about? Like, when this goes on and on and on, and it starts becoming this thing, and Patrick Mahomes deals with it amazingly. I'm stunned with how well he handles it, and he diverts it, mostly by not saying much. But is this, if it's not a problem now, is it going to become a problem for him at some point?
I don't mean to answer Aaron's question the way it was phrased. It's a problem. I know the organization had a problem with it. I knew that back in midseason when they were, 3 and 4, and there was a lot of frustration with what was happening around him, with the brother on social media, with the fiance on social media, with the special treatment. There is certainly a sense around the organization, at least back then, that there was too much happening around him. And so it is something that Patrick Mahomes is going to have to deal with over time. And I think, obviously, he loves his family. He wants to protect them. He thinks the best of them. But you also have to understand that playing quarterback in the NFL, as Jeff Garcia told me a long time ago when he was a starter, that it's not so much what you do on the field, it's everything around you off the field that can throw you off your game. And so, yeah, it can certainly become a bigger issue, because at some point, he's going to be answering questions about this at press conferences every week. He's going to have to be the guy who's going to have to explain what happened in this situation. You saw that in Baltimore when the water throwing incident happened. And so, yeah, I know that there's been frustration within the organization with it. I know that they've had a lot to be upset about in terms, especially with the brother, with the social media stuff. So he's going to have to put it in check somehow.
Yeah. Eric, your thoughts on whether or not this, the distraction thing? I think there was an issue early on. I agree with Jeff. And we talked about all the distractions you get just being a normal individual, where you're getting married, having a kid, building houses. That's a distraction. There's no way around it. I mean, we've all been through those different things. It distracts you. You. It's not to say that you don't then rework your life and figure out how to incorporate those things into your life and then find a way to get back to being as good as you were. But it's a step back to hopefully take 2 steps forward. Maybe he's done that, but at some point, here's the thought. If you don't want to be yelled at on the field, don't go on the field.
Well, and before Eric answers, it's a problem around town in restaurants and bars too. I mean, there's definitely a sense that people are like, if Jackson Mahomes walks in here, what's going to happen? I don't want him walking in here. So that's just to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I think Pat's ingratiated himself to the community, from what I can tell, as well as anybody, right? There was the pizza parlor story where, he sat down and ate a meal with his fiance and got up. No one gave him no one rushed to him, and he, sort of said, "Hey, thank you for, letting me have a normal night. Pizza's on me," or whatever. Like, for him, I think you risk a lot of the goodwill being gone because your brother's and what do the kids say, chasing clout. Like, your brother's chasing clout, and and the guy really hasn't done anything for himself, right? But we've had this problem with players and their entourages for years. I know Randy Moss in like the 2000 NFC Championship game brought all of his friends on the field. They lose 41-0, and everybody's like, was this the reason why? And there's a number of times where that can happen. I think the issue here is it's repeated, it's predictable too. It's the same stuff over and over and over again, and people are shaking their head at it. And so what it does is it and a lot of this stuff, Pat's not the first person in the history of the world to have a high profile position and also have just the sort of nonsense surrounding him. It just raises the bar so much higher, right? You have to perform. You have to perform at a level that overcomes all of that for people to put up with you. And that just is an extra layer of pressure on him that I wish he didn't have to deal with as a Chiefs fan.
I think there's a level of, and Hound Dog had it. He said, he's clearly the eldest son, but I wish they'd stop giving him more crap to deal with. You're in his inner circle. You should be protecting him and preventing it, right? Like, there is an element of, if you're going to, and I don't know what the financial arrangements are. And listen, I've said all along, his brother was 17, 18 years old when he came up to Kansas City, and Patrick Mahomes was seemingly put in charge of him. I think that's an unbelievable task to put on a 21-year-old. And, that, forget about then who's also living his life in a spotlight, right? Like, I mean, that's a lot. I will always scratch my head and say I can't quite figure that one out, but everyone's family dynamics are different, and far be it from me to judge how their family works. And I wish them all the best. We all do. There is an element of channel your inner Belichick, know your role and do your job. Like, if you're going to be around the king, you don't sit there and play Frisbee with his crown, right? Like, let him sit on the throne and rule the throne and stay the hell out of his way. And, and at some point, I mean, I hate to say this, it's on Patrick Mahomes.
It is.
It's on him. Like, the Chiefs can do this or that, and his agent can do this or that. His mom or his dad can do this or that. Patrick Mahomes is a grown ass man, to quote what somebody said a long time ago, and it's on him to put his house in order, right?
Yeah. Well, at some point, either if it's not stopping, at some point people think you're okay with it. And that's where you don't want him to be, right? I don't think he's okay with this. I think he's a pretty good guy. And I think he cares about the community. He cares about being an ambassador for Kansas City. He cares about playing good football. He cares about his family. But, part of being in this position is you got to keep your house in order. And this stuff ain't happening with Tom Brady. Yeah, it's happening with Aaron Rodgers. He's had his issues, but for the most part, people understand, players in that position understand the importance of, I don't want to say putting people in check. That sounds a little bit too severe, but it's making people understand that he's the one who takes all the blows in the end. We ain't going to talking about Jackson Mahomes or Brittany or whoever else is involved in the end. He's the one that has to answer the questions, about what happens. And his brother can put out a social media post apologizing for being a jerk at a restaurant or getting involved with water throwing or dancing on somebody's number at a tribute. But end of the day, those questions come back to Patrick Mahomes, and it's one more thing he's got to deal with over the course of a week when he's trying to win football games. It's just tough to do that.
Yeah, and it's like, the dancing on the number with the Sean Taylor thing. I had people explain it to me. Listen, that's where they roped off the area for him to be in. It's the football team that put him there, right? It's not his choice. But when you've got all this other stuff going on, it's guilt by association, right? You don't get the benefit of the doubt when time and time again you put yourself in a bad position. Excuse me, in a bad position. And I'm going to tell you, at some point, at some point, kids start going, "Hey, why is everybody, ripping Uncle, so and so? Why is you're like it's not just Patrick Mahomes. At some point, it's going to be his daughter going, "What's going on with this?" Right? And so there is an element, and that's why I say, look, for his football career, that's sideways, or that's secondary. For his life, these things need to come together. So listen, I always say I don't talk about people's personal lives until it affects them on the field. And I think this year it's debatable, right? He didn't have a bad year, but I think we could say he had his worst year, right? In a year that there's been a lot of stuff going on. This has been his worst year. Yes, Eric?
Yeah, it's not close. He's, you look at a lot of statistics, he's outside the top 10 in the NFL in a lot. Expected points added, he's done pretty well. And I think some of that is Andy Reid has actually had a better year than I think the narrative suggests. But yeah, he is not at his best year. I think this is a big offseason for him. To me, this reminds me of Brady in 2006, right? Where, you miss, 2005, you lose to Jake Plummer and the Broncos, right? And then 2006, you're messing around with Shea Caldwell and Jabbar Gaffney, and you have you play, you overcome some of that, but it's not pretty. And then you come in the offseason, you're like, okay, let's get this thing together, right? Let's get Welker, let's get Moss, let's get an offensive line, let's get Adalius Thomas on the defense, and we're going to blowtorch the league. And I think, to your point, Soren, sometimes in life you let things get out of control, and you need a reset period. And it's hard for a guy like Mahomes in the middle of a season to be like, okay, I'm resetting here. I'm taking away some. I'm not doing as many endorsements. I'm not buying as many houses. My brother's not coming on the field anymore. To change all that mid-season, I think could cause issues. But I think once the season's over, the biggest thing for Mahomes is just to have a reset and say, look, I'm changing the assumptions that surround me. You think because you're part of my group, you can go to every game. We're reevaluating that. I'm going to have this many endorsements. I'm going to have that many endorsements. And then he comes back next season. To me, if he comes back next season with some more, I think, mature sort of like assumptions about what his world's going to look like, I think he might set passing records, especially given the fact that this season, you're talking about he's low sevens in terms of yards per attempt. Like it's not, it's not what he put up in 18. And I think he's going to look at that and say, why is that true? And he's going to look around and be like, it's because I got to deal with this nonsense. This is it's like a computer that's got to deal with the virus. It's like, it's constantly slowing things down. And it's like, I got to eliminate that.
But real quick, Jeff, he's got to be honest with himself. I think that's one of the most important things in sports. I say it all the time, whether you're a team or an individual, is looking in the mirror and accurately seeing what's looking back at you. And you can think you're doing everything, but if you find that you're running off to solve this problem or that problem or whatever, like I said, there are real life issues that force you to do that. without having somebody else dump some other things that you've got to do. Like, hey, I didn't see that safety. And you know what? Because I didn't put the same time in on the iPad looking through all the film. I went through it once, but I didn't go through it 2 or 3 times because instead of being focused, on the plane or on the bus to and fro, I was on my phone trying to solve some drama somewhere. You're not putting in the same effort.
Yeah. And I would say that the thing about Tom Brady at a young age, at this age that Patrick is at, the one thing he had going for him that Mahomes does not have within the locker room, and I agree with what Aaron's saying. I think he's handled it pretty well for somebody who the average person, 24, 25, 26 years old, is at. Tom Brady had a locker room that had Willie McGinnis in it. He had a locker room that had Teddy Bruschi in it. He had a locker room that had Mike Vrabel in it. And a lot of guys who've been around the NFL for a long time who were almost like older brothers to him. And he's got some of that with Travis Kelce. But for the most part, most of the guys in that locker room are guys who are either younger than him or guys who are subordinate to him. And that's tough. That's tough when you're the one guy in the room who everybody's looking at as you got all the answers. You're the guy supposed to make everything happen. Tom Brady, for the first 5-6 years of his career, was somebody who was part of the team, not the guy who was driving the bus. And so guys like Vrabel and McGinnis, they would talk to him and tell him how to handle things. And so he learned how to conduct himself and how to deal with issues. And he didn't have the same kind of problems that Mahomes has in his personal life right now with some of these antics. But there was a level of, hey, we're going to tell you when you got to get things figured out here. Like, it wouldn't get to the point where he would have special treatment for his family and nobody would say, hey, man, that's kind of messed up. Like, check your family or something like that. He needs some of that, and it's not coming from the locker room. If it's not coming from the locker room, I don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, pick number 1 said Mahomes has a locker room that has a guy calling the fan base toxic, referring to what Matthew said during the season that he got frustrated with the fan base. There is an us against the world, and the world's all out to get us. And I think Andy Reid breeds that, right? I think he breeds it for to try to bring everybody together. I think that's just part of what they do. But I think you make a great point. Like, who is it was Mitchell Schwartz and Eric Fisher probably when he came in, Justin Houston for 10 minutes. Eric Berry was, I mean, whatever was going on with Eric Berry, I can't say that.
He was day to day.
Yeah, he was day to day.
Oh, about day to day.
Yes.
Eric Berry literally missed 15 weeks of a season and was never put on IR. Like that 18 season. And then he played like half of the Chargers game where they got hawked from behind on that Thursday night game. And then somehow randomly showed up in the AFC title game just to get mossed by Gronk a few times. That was a strange year.
The man said, I was going to come back last week, but my soul wasn't into it. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something to that effect.
Jeff, Soren, I'll promise you my soul's into it Thursday.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I think that very quickly after that season was over, there were people that did not know where on the planet he was.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and look, find happiness wherever it is. I don't care. Football can beat the hell out of you. And I think he was pretty beat up. I think there was some Andrew Luck, like that's it. That's all I can handle. And he hung around. He probably would have been better just walking away, going, I'm not gonna say Antonio Brown, but who was the Bills and Colts DB?
You're talking about Vontae Davis?
Vontae Davis. Yeah.
I mean, look, he was the first guy to retire during a game before Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think Antonio Brown was not a conscious retirement.
Yeah, I don't think it was a plan.
Voluntary.
I do love this. Why Not says, when I lose a bet, my soul wasn't into it. I love it. Hound Dog remembers he didn't feel it in his spirit. That's what it was. Nice job.
It's even worse.
Yeah, he didn't feel it in his spirit. All right, before we get out of here, what happens in this game against the Steelers? Are we, Jeff, going to see just a repeat of what we saw a couple of weeks ago? Closer, bigger? What do you think?
It'll be closer. Again, I imagine the Steelers.
Tough to not be.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be as bad as it was. That was as bad of a football game bad of a performance in a football game as I've seen from a football team in a long time. So I don't think they're going to come in here and lay down like they did in that game. I think they'll come in here, they'll fight. They won't win, but they'll certainly be a lot more competitive. I imagine it'll probably be somewhere around 28-17.
Okay, 28-17, Eric.
Jeff's betting the Pittsburgh Steelers to cover. I will say that in the Tomlin era, he is a fairly good underdog, right? He's a very good underdog. And that's how you go, that is how you go like 15 years without a losing season. I said on your show, I think they win by 7 or more. That's I'll say 28-14. I think the game goes under the total too. I think the Chiefs try their best to get out of this game quickly too, if that makes sense. I think that it's not going to be they're not going to want to get into some sort of shootout. It's not going to be kind of like with Big Ben and how he like last year, he went like the last 2 playoff games Big Ben's lost. He went something like 45 of 60 for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns because they were behind. I think this is more of like the Big Ben going like 20 of 36 for 110 yards. Like I think this is a whimper into retirement for Big Ben.
I think the performance against the Denver Broncos opened the door to the Steelers, and even with their mediocre to poor offensive line saying, we got to pound the rock. Like, I mean, they've seen Ben can't just do it on his own. So I think the Chiefs are going to have to prove that they can stop the run, or this thing could grind into some, turdy-looking Bills-Jets thing going into the fourth quarter. Like, I don't think that's where they wanted to be. And in the end, the Bills said, all right, see ya, we're out of here, and went by. I will say from a wagering standpoint, you either bet the Chiefs or you don't bet it, just because I don't think the Steelers, I think the Chiefs at any moment could just skate on them and just run away and hide. And if the Steelers turn the football over, then it gets ugly. And that's what happened the last time. If they don't turn the ball over, they can run this thing into the mud, and you end up with some kind of 20-13 Chiefs win. But I think more realistically, the Chiefs get it done on offense. I don't think there's enough firepower on the Steeler defense to slow them down. And I think this is what they've been waiting for. I'll go back to what I said. They're going to be judged by right now, and they know it. And this is what they've been looking for. There's a little bit of, I'm not calling Patrick Mahomes Jordan or this team the Bulls, but after, the Bulls set the best record in the regular season, they could have chased that number. They didn't. They knew it was about putting championships up. I think that's where this team is, and I think you see their best performance in this game. I think they run away and hide. You bet the Chiefs or you don't bet it. That's going to do it for us here on Red, Gold, and Bold. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Remember, you can catch us Thursday night. We'll be talking all the NFL playoffs on our Too Deep, TOODEEP, Too Deep podcast, which we stream live Thursdays at 9 p.m. And, of course, you can catch that wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.